The leather-bound diary fell from the saddle roll when Hayes Turner dismounted, its pages fluttering open in the New Mexico dust like a wounded bird trying to fly. Hayes reached down to pick it up, expecting to find his own journal, but the handwriting that greeted him was delicate and distinctly feminine. The first entry was dated March 15, 1882, just 3 weeks prior, and the ink still held a faint scent of lavender. "If anyone finds this, please know that I did not leave of my own accord. My name is Amelia Foster, and I fear what tomorrow may bring." Hayes stood there in the late afternoon sun outside Santa Rosa, New Mexico, his dust-covered fingers tracing the words. He had stopped at this abandoned trading post to water his horse, expecting nothing more than a brief rest before continuing his journey to the lumber camp, where he had work waiting. Now he held something that made his chest tighten with an urgency he could not explain. He flipped through more pages, reading quickly. The entries spoke of a young woman traveling with her uncle's merchant caravan, of growing unease, of suspicions about the men her uncle had hired. The final entry, dated just 5 days ago, mentioned a place called Rabbit Springs, and the words, "I will try to leave signs." Hayes looked around the empty trading post. Broken barrels, scattered supplies, and dark stains on the wooden planks that could have been anything. He walked his buckskin mare, Honey, around the perimeter and found what he was looking for near the back. Scratched into a post with something sharp were the initials AF and an arrow pointing northeast. The logical part of his mind told him to ride on, to deliver the diary to the sheriff in the next town and let the law handle it. But Hayes had learned long ago that the law in these territories moved slowly, if it moved at all. A young woman in trouble could not afford to wait for bureaucracy. He was 24 years old, had been working cattle drives and ranch work since he was 15, and had seen enough of the harsh realities of frontier life to know that 3 weeks was already a lifetime when someone went missing. Yet something about those careful words, that elegant handwriting, pulled at something deep in his chest. Hayes made his decision. He swung back into the saddle and turned Honey northeast, following the direction of the arrow. The lumber camp would have to wait. The land stretched out before him in shades of brown and gold, dotted with juniper and piñon pine. He rode until the sun began to sink, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, then made camp near a small creek. As he sat by his fire, he read more of the diary by flickering light. Amelia Foster wrote with precision and poetry. She described the landscape they traveled through, the people they encountered, the small moments of beauty she found even in hardship. She had been raised in St. Louis, educated in a proper school, but circumstances had forced her west after her father's death 2 years prior. Her uncle, Marcus Foster, had taken her in, but their relationship seemed strained. "Uncle Marcus looks at me sometimes as though I am a ledger that does not balance," she wrote. "I am grateful for his charity, yet I wonder if charity that comes with resentment is charity at all." Hayes found himself drawn to her voice, to the intelligence and quiet strength that came through every line. He had known many people in his travels, but few who could put words together like this, who could make him see the world through their eyes. The next morning he rose before dawn and continued northeast. By midday he found another sign, this one less obvious. A small cairn of rocks beside the trail, and tucked beneath the top stone, a scrap of blue fabric. He held it up to the light. Good quality cotton, torn deliberately, not frayed by accident. She was smart, this Amelia Foster. Smart enough to leave a trail without making it obvious to whoever might be watching her. Hayes pushed on, and the land began to change. They climbed into higher country where ponderosa pines grew tall, and the air carried the sharp scent of sap. He passed a small settlement where he stopped to ask questions. An old Mexican man tending a vegetable garden nodded when Hayes described a merchant caravan. Yes, they came through here maybe 6, 7 days ago. 4 wagons, maybe 8 men and a woman. Pretty woman with dark hair. She looked sad. Did you see which way they went? The man pointed toward the mountains. Toward the old mining camps. Strange, though. That is not the merchant road. Nothing up there any more but ghosts and played-out mines. Hayes thanked him and rode on, his unease growing. If Marcus Foster was a legitimate merchant, why would he head toward abandoned mines instead of towns where he could sell his goods? At night, reading by firelight again, he found entries that suggested answers. Amelia had noticed discrepancies in her uncle's business. Goods purchased but never sold, money changing hands in late-night meetings, men who looked more like outlaws than teamsters. I fear Uncle Marcus has fallen in with bad men, she wrote. Or perhaps he was always a bad man and I was too naive to see it. I heard them talking tonight about a shipment, but they were not talking about calico or coffee. They mentioned guns and ammunition and a name, Cordova. When I asked Uncle Marcus about it, he told me to mind my own affairs and remember that I eat by his generosity. Hayes stared at that name. Cordova. Everyone in New Mexico territory knew that name. Ramon Cordova ran guns and stirred up trouble, playing all sides against each other. If Marcus Foster was involved with Cordova, then Amelia was in more danger than she probably realized. The trail led him higher into the mountains, following narrow paths that switch-backed through thick timber. He found another marker, this one a small pile of pine cones arranged in a triangle, and beneath them, tucked into the earth, another scrap of blue fabric. On the 3rd day, he heard voices. Hayes dismounted and led Honey off the trail, tying her in a sheltered spot where she could graze quietly. He moved forward on foot, using every skill he had learned hunting and tracking. The voices grew louder, and he smelled smoke from a campfire. Through the trees, he saw the camp. 4 wagons arranged in a rough circle, a large fire in the center. He counted 7 men, all armed, all with the hard look of men who lived outside the law. And there, sitting on a log near one of the wagons, was a woman. Even from a distance, even though he had never seen her before, Hayes knew it was Amelia Foster. She matched the description from his questions, but more than that, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity that came through her writing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, her dress travel stained but still neat. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her eyes were watching, always watching. A heavy-set man with a thick beard approached her, and Hayes saw her stiffen. The man said something Hayes could not hear, and Amelia shook her head. The man's voice rose, angry now, and he grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet. Hayes had his rifle in his hands before he consciously decided to move. He worked the lever action, the metallic sound cutting through the evening air like a bell. Every man in the camp froze. The bearded man released Amelia's arm and reached for his gun. "I would not do that," Hayes called out, still concealed in the tree line. "I have a Winchester pointed right at your chest, and I am a very good shot." "Who the hell are you?" the bearded man shouted. "Someone who found a diary and decided to follow it. Miss Foster, are you all right?" He saw Amelia's head snap around, searching the trees for him. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady. "I am unharmed, but I am being held here against my will." "That is a damned lie," another man said, stepping forward. He was older, with gray in his hair and a merchant's coat that looked too fine for this rough camp. This had to be Marcus Foster. "She is my niece, and she is here under my protection." Funny kind of protection that leaves bruises on her arm, Hayes said. Miss Foster, do you want to be here? No, Amelia said firmly. I do not. Marcus Foster's face reddened. You ungrateful girl, after everything I have done for you. You mean after you tried to sell me to Cordova's man to settle your debts? Amelia's voice shook but did not break. I heard you. I heard everything. The bearded man laughed. Well, the cat is out of the bag now, Marcus. Might as well finish the deal. Hayes made his decision. He could not take on 7 armed men, even with surprise on his side. But he could create enough chaos to give Amelia a chance. Miss Foster, when I start shooting, you run straight into the trees behind you. My horse is tied about 50 yards back on the trail. Her name is Honey, and she is gentle. Get on her and ride. But what about you? Amelia called out. I will catch up. Now get ready. He did not give them time to think. He fired a shot that kicked up dust right between the bearded man's feet, then immediately shifted aim and put a round through the water barrel, which exploded in a spray that scattered the fire and sent men diving for cover. Amelia ran. She lifted her skirts and sprinted for the tree line with impressive speed. Hayes laid down covering fire, not trying to hit anyone but keeping them pinned down. He saw Marcus Foster reach for a rifle, and Hayes put a round close enough to make him reconsider. Then Hayes was moving, falling back through the trees, working his way toward where he had left Honey. Behind him, men were shouting, organizing themselves for pursuit. He heard gunfire, wild shots from men who were firing at shadows. He reached the small clearing where he had tied his mare, and his heart surged with relief. Amelia was already there, struggling to mount the tall horse in her long dress. Hayes ran to her, cupped his hands, and boosted her up into the saddle. Can you ride? He asked. Well enough, she said, gathering the reins with hands that only trembled slightly. Then ride hard back the way we came. There was a settlement about 15 miles back. Find the old Mexican man with the garden. Tell him Hayes Turner sent you and that you need help. Can you do that? What about you? I will be right behind you. He slapped Honey's flank and the mare took off at a gallop. Hayes turned to face the pursuit. He moved to a defensive position behind a large ponderosa pine, checking his ammunition. He had maybe 20 rounds left. Enough to slow them down if he was smart about it. The first man came crashing through the underbrush with no caution at all. Hayes fired a warning shot over his head, and the man dove back into cover. Good. He wanted them cautious, wanted them slow. But there were 7 of them, and they began to spread out, trying to flank him. Hayes fell back, moving from cover to cover, firing just often enough to keep them honest. The sun was setting fast now, which worked in his favor. In the gathering darkness, one man with knowledge of the terrain could hold off many. He led them in a wide circle, away from the direction Amelia had gone. It was full dark when he finally broke contact, moving silently through the forest until he was sure he had lost them. Then he turned and headed back toward the settlement, traveling by starlight, every sense alert. It took him most of the night, moving on foot, but he finally saw the scattered lights of the small settlement. He approached cautiously, and relief flooded through him when he saw Honey tied outside the old Mexican man's house. The door opened before he could knock. The old man stood there with a shotgun, but lowered it when he recognized Hayes. Your woman is inside. She is safe. She is not my woman, Hayes said automatically, then wondered why he felt the need to clarify. I mean, I just met her. I found her diary and... The old man smiled. Come inside, young man. You look like you could use some food. Amelia was sitting at a rough wooden table, a blanket around her shoulders, a cup of something hot in her hands. When Hayes entered, she looked up, and the expression on her face made something in his chest tighten. You are alive, she said, and there were tears in her eyes. I was so worried. You stayed behind to save me, and I did not even know your name until Señor Ramirez told me. Hayes Turner, madam, and there is no need for tears. I am fine and you are safe. That is what matters. She stood up, setting down the cup, and crossed the room to him. Before he could react, she took both his hands in hers. You risked your life for me, for a stranger. I do not have words to thank you properly. This close, he could see that her eyes were a deep brown, flecked with gold in the lamplight. She smelled like pine and smoke, and that faint hint of lavender from the diary. She was perhaps 22 or 23, he guessed, with a face that was more interesting than classically beautiful, full of intelligence and determination. No thanks are needed, Hayes said, his voice rougher than he intended. Any decent man would have done the same. I think we both know that is not true, Amelia said softly. Most men would have turned the diary over to authorities and ridden on with their lives. You came yourself. You followed the trail I left. You found me. Señor Ramirez cleared his throat. Sit, both of you. Eat. Maria has made enough food for an army and you both need strength. In the morning we will talk about what to do next. They sat and ate, and slowly the tension began to drain from the room. Hayes told them about finding the diary, about following the trail. Amelia listened, and he saw wonder in her expression. I hoped someone would find it, she said. I dropped it deliberately at the trading post, put it somewhere visible, but I never imagined someone would actually follow it. Most people would not want to get involved. The diary, Hayes said. You wrote about your uncle, about Cordova. Amelia's expression darkened. My uncle is not a good man. I did not realize how not good until recently. He runs guns for Cordova and he owes money to dangerous people. He thought he could settle his debt by offering me to one of Cordova's lieutenants, a man named Diego Vargas. I heard them making the arrangement. That is why you left the trail, Hayes said. That is why you were so careful. I knew if I tried to run, they would catch me. I am not a skilled rider and I do not know this country, but I thought if I could leave a trail if someone found it, if help came. She trailed off, looking at him. I am sorry. I put you in terrible danger. I chose to come, Hayes said firmly, and I am glad I did. Their eyes met across the table and something passed between them that neither could name but both felt. Señor Ramirez spoke up. These men, they will not give up easily, especially if she knows things about their business. In the morning, you should go to Santa Rosa. There is a U.S. Marshal there, a good man named Tom Crawford. He has been trying to build a case against Cordova for months. Miss Foster's testimony could help him. Then that is what we will do, Hayes said. Maria Ramirez prepared a bed for Amelia in their small spare room, and Hayes bedded down in the barn with Honey and the Ramirez's milk cow. He lay in the hay, watching moonlight stream through gaps in the roof, and thought about dark brown eyes and a voice that matched the one he had come to know through journal entries. He did not sleep much. In the morning, they prepared for the journey to Santa Rosa. Señor Ramirez gave them supplies and his old mule for Amelia to ride. Hayes tried to pay him, but the old man refused. You helped someone who needed help, Ramirez said. That is what decent people do. Go with God, my young friends. They set out as the sun rose, riding south and west toward Santa Rosa. It was a full day's journey, maybe more, and Hayes kept them moving at a steady pace while constantly watching their back trail. Amelia proved to be a better rider than she had claimed. She sat the mule with reasonable confidence, and she did not complain about the pace or the heat as the day wore on. Instead, she talked. I have thought about nothing but escape for 2 weeks, she said as they rode. And now that I am free, I find myself thinking about what comes next. I have no money, no prospects. My uncle was my only family. The marshal will help you, Hayes said, And there are agencies in Santa Fe that help women in difficult situations. Charity, Amelia said, and he heard bitterness in her voice. I am so tired of charity. I am educated, Hayes. I can read and write and do figures. I speak some Spanish and French. But what use are those skills out here? More use than you might think, Hayes said. This territory is growing. Towns need teachers, need people who can keep books and write letters for those who cannot. You have skills, Amelia. You just need a chance to use them. She was quiet for a moment. You called me Amelia. I am sorry, Miss Foster. I should have asked permission to use your given name. No, she said quickly. I like it. After reading my diary, after everything you have done, I think we can dispense with formalities. Please call me Amelia. Then you should call me Hayes. They rode on, and the conversation flowed more easily now. She asked about his life, and he told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was young, about learning to make his way in the world through hard work and determination. I have been moving from job to job for years, he admitted. Never staying anywhere long. I tell myself it is because I like to see new places, but the truth is probably that I have never found anywhere I wanted to stay. You get lonely? Amelia asked softly. Hayes thought about that. Sometimes. Mostly I am too busy to think about it. But yes, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a place of my own, someone to share it with. He felt her eyes on him but did not turn to meet them. The conversation felt too intimate suddenly, too weighted with things neither of them was ready to say. They stopped to rest and water the animals at midday, sharing the food Maria Ramirez had packed. As they sat in the shade of a rocky outcrop, Amelia pulled something from her pocket. It was her diary, somehow still with her. I grabbed it from the wagon before I ran, she explained. I know it probably seems silly, but these pages are all I have of the last 2 years. All my thoughts, my hopes, my observations. I could not leave it behind. It is not silly at all, Hayes said. Those words saved your life. If you had not left it at the trading post, I never would have found you. Fate, Amelia said thoughtfully. Do you believe in it? In the idea that some things are meant to happen? I never gave it much thought before, Hayes admitted. I have always figured a man makes his own way, that life is what you make of it. But finding your diary, following the trail, finding you exactly when you needed help. He shook his head. That does seem like more than coincidence. I believe in it, Amelia said. I believe that everything happens for a reason, even the hard things. My father dying brought me west. Coming west led me to discover my uncle's true nature. Discovering that led me to leave the diary. The diary brought you, she smiled. And now here we are. Here we are, Hayes echoed, and found himself smiling back. They reached Santa Rosa as the sun was setting, turning the adobe buildings golden in the fading light. It was a decent-sized town, the county seat, with a proper main street and a marshal's office right on the plaza. Marshal Tom Crawford was a lean man in his 40s, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet competence. He listened to Amelia's story without interruption, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound book that reminded Hayes of her diary. This is good information, Crawford said when she finished. Very good. I have been trying to build a case against Cordova and his network for 6 months, but people are afraid to talk. Your uncle's involvement, the gun-running operation, the names you heard, all of this helps considerably. Will she be safe? Hayes asked. Her uncle and his men will be looking for her. I will keep her safe, Crawford said firmly. There is a boarding house run by Mrs. Sullivan, a widow woman who has helped me before in situations like this. Miss Foster can stay there under protection while I organize an operation against your uncle's camp. With luck, we can round up the whole gang. Amelia looked relieved but also uncertain. And after? What happens to me after? Crawford's expression softened. We will figure that out, miss. One thing at a time. For now, let's get you settled and safe. The boarding house was a neat two-story building on a quiet street. Mrs. Sullivan was a practical woman in her 50s who asked no unnecessary questions and showed Amelia to a clean room with genuine kindness. Hayes stood in the street outside, suddenly unsure of his place. His job was done. He had found Amelia, brought her to safety, delivered her to the law. He should go on his way, head to that lumber camp, get back to his life. But the thought of riding away, of never seeing Amelia again, sat in his chest like a stone. Amelia came back downstairs and found him still standing there. "I thought you might have left," she said, and he heard something in her voice that might have been relief or might have been hope. "I should go," Hayes said. "You are safe now. The marshal will take care of things." "Yes," Amelia said. "You should go. You have your own life, your own plans." She paused. "But I hope you will not yet." "Amelia." "Stay," she said simply, "at least for a few days. I would like to know you are near while all of this is resolved. Is that selfish of me?" "No," Hayes said. "It is not selfish at all." So he stayed. He took a room in a hotel near the plaza, stabled Honey at the livery, and found himself with time on his hands for the first time in years. Santa Rosa was busy with spring commerce, and he watched the flow of wagons and people with the eye of someone who had spent his life on the move. The next day, Marshal Crawford organized a posse. Hayes volunteered to ride with them, and Crawford accepted, saying he could use men who knew how to handle themselves. They rode out at dawn, 12 men strong, following the trail back toward the mountain camp. They found it abandoned. Marcus Foster and his men had cleared out fast, leaving behind only the wagons, which were indeed full of guns and ammunition. Crawford confiscated everything and left 2 men to guard the site while the rest of them tracked the gang. The trail led them in circles for 2 days before they lost it completely in rocky terrain. Crawford was frustrated but philosophical. They will make a mistake eventually. They always do. And now I have evidence, real evidence of the gun-running operation. That is worth something. They rode back to Santa Rosa empty-handed, but not defeated. Hayes found himself glad the confrontation had not turned violent. He had seen enough shooting for 1 week. Amelia was waiting at the marshal's office when they returned. Her face lit up when she saw Hayes, and that expression made the long, frustrating ride worthwhile. "You are back," she said unnecessarily. "You are safe." "We did not find them," Hayes said. "Your uncle and his men got away." Some of the light faded from her expression. "So I am still in danger." "You are under my protection," Crawford said firmly. "And I will have men watching. If they come anywhere near Santa Rosa, we will know about it." Over the next few days, Hayes found reasons to stay. He helped at the livery stable, earning his keep. He checked on Amelia daily, and those visits stretched from brief conversations to long walks around the town. They talked about everything, from books to philosophy to their dreams for the future. "I want to teach," Amelia confided one evening as they sat on the porch of the boarding house. "I want to open a school for girls, teach them not just reading and writing but how to think, how to question, how to be independent. Too many women end up dependent on men who do not have their best interests at heart." "Like your uncle," Hayes said. "Like my uncle," she agreed. "And like my father in a way, though I loved him dearly. He never taught me anything practical about money or business. He left me completely unprepared for the world. I want to do better for other girls." "You would be an excellent teacher," Hayes said. "I can tell from your diary. The way you see the world, the way you describe things. You make people think." Amelia looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You really did read the whole thing, did you not?" I had not quite believed it until now. Most people would have skimmed a few entries and moved on. I read every word, Hayes admitted. Some entries multiple times. Your voice, the way you write it, drew me in. I felt like I knew you before we ever met. And now that you have met me, Amelia asked softly, am I as you imagined? Hayes thought carefully before answering. You are more. The diary showed me your mind, your thoughts. But it could not show me your courage, the way you kept your head when most people would have panicked. It could not show me your smile or the sound of your laugh. You are more than I imagined, Amelia, and I imagined quite a lot. She reached out and took his hand. It was the first time they had touched since that night in the Ramirez home, and Hayes felt the contact like an electric current. I am falling in love with you, Amelia said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the words. I know it is too soon, too fast. I know we have only known each other for a week, but when I think about you riding away, going back to your wandering life, I feel like I am losing something precious before I ever really had it. Hayes turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. I have been trying not to say those exact words, trying to be sensible, to remind myself that you have been through a trauma and might be confusing gratitude with something else. But the truth is, I have been falling in love with you since I read the first entry in your diary. And meeting you, knowing you, has only made it stronger. Then why do you fight it? Amelia asked. Because I have nothing to offer you, Hayes said, and the frustration in his voice was directed at himself. I am a drifter, Amelia. I own a horse, a saddle, some clothes, and a rifle. I have maybe $60 to my name. You deserve stability, security, all the things I cannot provide. I deserve to choose my own path, Amelia said firmly, and I choose you, if you will have me. Hayes stood up, pulling her to her feet with him. They stood close together on the porch, the evening air cool around them, the sounds of the town settling in for night creating a gentle backdrop. I will have you, Hayes said, on one condition. What condition? That you give me time to become a man worthy of you. I need to find work, real work. I need to build something, save money, create a life that can support a wife. Will you wait for me while I do that? Amelia smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. I will wait, but I have a condition of my own. What is it? That we do it together. That you do not run off trying to be some kind of hero, building a life in isolation before you come back for me. We are partners, Hayes. We face things together. He kissed her then, unable to help himself. It was a gentle kiss, full of promise and restrained passion, the kiss of two people beginning a journey they both knew would change everything. When they broke apart, Amelia was laughing softly. I dropped a diary and got a future. The world is a strange and wonderful place. It is, Hayes agreed. It truly is. The next week brought changes and challenges. Marshal Crawford's investigation expanded. He brought in federal marshals from Santa Fe, and the operation against Cordova's gun-running network became a priority. Amelia gave multiple statements, and her information proved invaluable. Hayes used the time to explore opportunities in Santa Rosa. He talked to ranchers, businessmen, anyone who might need a reliable worker. His reputation grew when word spread about how he had rescued Amelia. People in frontier towns respected courage and decency. A man named Richard Thornton, who owned a large ranch south of town, sought Hayes out. I hear you are good with horses and good in a crisis. I could use a man like that. I need someone to manage my horse operation, breaking and training. It pays $60 a month plus room and board. Interested? $60 a month was better money than Hayes had ever made. He could save, build a nest egg, create the foundation for a real life. But the ranch was 20 miles from Santa Rosa, and the thought of being that far from Amelia made him hesitate. Thornton, who was nobody's fool, smiled slightly. You are thinking about the Foster girl. I heard about that too. Here is what I will offer. Take the job but work in town. I need someone to manage my business here anyway, buying and selling horses, coordinating shipments. Same pay and you stay close to your lady. Deal. Hayes shook his hand. Deal. He told Amelia that evening and she threw her arms around him with unrestrained joy. This is perfect. This is the start of everything. It is a good job, Hayes said, returning her embrace. But I still need time to save money to prepare properly before we can think about marriage. How much time? Amelia asked, pulling back to look at him. 6 months, Hayes said. Maybe a year. I want to have enough saved to buy land, to build a house, to give you a real home. 6 months, Amelia agreed. But no more. I am not a patient woman when it comes to things I want, and I want a life with you. They settled into a routine that felt both domestic and full of anticipation. Hayes worked for Thornton, proving himself quickly. He had a good eye for horses and a gift for training, and within a month, he was not just managing the town operation but expanding it, buying horses from local ranchers and selling them to the army and to merchants heading further west. Amelia, meanwhile, began teaching. There was no official school in Santa Rosa, but several families had children who needed education. She started small, gathering students in a room at the boarding house, teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography. Her students adored her, and soon parents were approaching her to take on more children. They saw each other every day. Hayes would stop by after work, and they would walk together, talking about their days, their dreams, their plans. The more time they spent together, the more certain Hayes became that Amelia was his future, his partner, his home. The only shadow over their happiness was the unresolved threat of Marcus Foster and his gang. There had been no sign of them since that night in the mountains, but Marshal Crawford warned that men like that did not simply disappear. 3 months after Amelia's rescue, the threat materialized. Hayes was at the livery stable, examining a string of horses that had just come in when a young boy ran up, breathless. "Mr. Turner, Marshal says to come quick. There are men asking about Miss Foster at the hotel." Hayes ran, his hand automatically checking that his pistol was still on his hip. He reached the marshal's office to find Crawford standing with 2 of his deputies, all armed. 4 men rode into town, Crawford said tersely. They are asking questions about a woman matching Amelia's description. They have not mentioned her by name, but it is too much of a coincidence. I have men watching them. They are at the Silver Dollar Saloon right now. Where is Amelia? Hayes demanded, still at the boarding house teaching. I have sent someone to warn Mrs. Sullivan to keep her inside and out of sight. I need to go to her, Hayes said. Not yet, Crawford said. First, we see what these men want. If they are looking for her, they do not know where she is yet. Let's keep it that way. They waited. It was the longest hour of Hayes's life. Finally, one of the deputies came back with information. They are looking for her, all right. They are saying Marcus Foster is her legal guardian and she ran away. They have some kind of paper, looks official, saying he has the right to reclaim her. Forgery, Crawford said flatly. Foster is a wanted criminal now. He has no legal rights to anything, but they might not know we know that. They might think they can just present papers and take her. We need to arrest them, Hayes said. On what charge? Asking questions is not a crime, and if we try to take them and it goes wrong, there could be shooting in the middle of town. Crawford shook his head. No, we need to be smart about this. We let them think they are making progress, then we trap them away from civilians. They set a plan. A deputy, pretending to be a helpful townsman, would tell the men he had heard of a woman matching the description staying at her ranch house 5 miles outside of town. They would ride out to investigate, and Crawford and his men would be waiting. It was a good plan, but Hayes insisted on being part of it. Crawford initially refused, but Hayes was adamant. "She is my future wife. I have a right to be there." Finally, Crawford agreed. "But you follow my orders. No heroics. Understood?" "Understood." They rode out before dawn, 7 men total, and set up positions around the abandoned ranch house that Crawford had chosen for the trap. Then they waited. The sun was well up when the 4 men appeared, riding cautiously. Hayes recognized one of them from the mountain camp, the bearded man who had grabbed Amelia's arm. His grip tightened on his rifle. The men dismounted and approached the house. When they pushed open the door, Crawford and his deputies moved in, surrounding them. "United States Marshal." Crawford called out, "Put your hands up and step outside slowly." For a moment, Hayes thought it would end peacefully. Then one of the men went for his gun. The shooting was brief but intense. Hayes stayed behind cover as Crawford had ordered, firing only when he had clear shots. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the men were down, wounded but alive. A third was dead, shot through the chest. The 4th, the bearded man, had his hands up, blood streaming from a wound in his shoulder. "Don't shoot," he yelled. "I surrender." They bound the survivors and loaded them onto horses. The dead man was tied across his saddle. It was grim work, and Hayes felt the weight of it. This was the violence of the frontier, the reality that lived alongside the beauty and opportunity. Back in Santa Rosa, the wounded men were taken to the doctor, then locked in the jail. The bearded man, whose name turned out to be Jack Brennan, started talking almost immediately once he realized the trouble he was in. "Marcus Foster is in Mexico," he said. "He ran when he heard the law was getting close. He sent us to get the girl, said she knew too much and we needed to shut her up permanent-like. But I am not hanging for murder I did not commit. I will tell you everything." And he did. He gave names, locations, details about the gun-running operation that tied everything together. Crawford's case became airtight. Hayes finally allowed himself to go to the boarding house. Amelia met him at the door. She had heard about the confrontation, about the shooting. She looked pale but composed. "It is over," Hayes said. "Your uncle is gone and the men he sent are in custody. You are safe now, truly safe." Amelia's composure cracked. She stepped into his arms and cried, great shaking sobs of relief and release. Hayes held her, stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "I have been so afraid for so long. Afraid that he would find me, that they would take me back or worse. And now it is over." "It is over," Hayes confirmed. "And now we can think about the future without shadows hanging over it." That night, they sat together on the boarding house porch, the same place where they had first confessed their feelings. The world felt different now, lighter, full of possibility. "I want to marry you," Hayes said. "I know we said 6 months, but I have saved enough for a start. It is not everything I wanted to have, but it is enough. Will you marry me, Amelia? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Amelia said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married a month later in the small Catholic church in Santa Rosa. It was a simple ceremony, but half the town turned out. Mrs. Sullivan cried happy tears. Senor and Maria Ramirez came all the way from their settlement to attend. Marshal Crawford served as one of the witnesses, and Richard Thornton was the other. Amelia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Sullivan had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Hayes wore new clothes, the first store-bought suit he had owned in his life. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, and Hayes kissed his new bride, he felt like the richest man in the territory. They used Hayes's savings to buy a small piece of land on the edge of Santa Rosa. It was not much, just 5 acres, but it had a creek running through it and good grass for horses. They built a small house together, working side by side. Amelia proved to be handy with a hammer, and Hayes discovered that building something permanent, something that would last, filled him with a satisfaction that drifting never had. Amelia continued teaching, and her school grew. Eventually, the town council offered to build a proper schoolhouse and pay her a salary. She became the official schoolteacher of Santa Rosa, respected and beloved. Hayes's horse business expanded. He and Thornton became true partners, and the operation became one of the most successful in the territory. They supplied horses to the army, to ranchers, to settlers heading further west. Hayes discovered he had a head for business to go along with his skill with animals. Their first child came 2 years after they married, a son they named Henry, after Hayes's father. He was a healthy baby with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn determination. 2 years later came a daughter, Anna, who had Amelia's intelligence and Hayes's love of horses. Life was not always easy. The frontier was a hard place, and they faced droughts, economic downturns, and the general challenges of building a life in a young territory. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Years passed, and Santa Rosa grew from a rough frontier town into a thriving community. The railroad came through in 1891, bringing new opportunities and new people. Hayes and Amelia's horse ranch became one of the established businesses in the region. Amelia's school produced generations of educated young people who went on to become teachers, business owners, and community leaders. They added 2 more children to their family, another boy and another girl, and their home was always full of noise and laughter and love. Hayes sometimes thought back to the man he had been before finding that diary, a drifter with no roots, no purpose beyond the next job. He could hardly recognize himself in that person. One evening, 20 years after they met, Hayes and Amelia sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the New Mexico landscape they had come to love. Their children were grown now, starting their own lives, but the house still felt full with just the 2 of them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found my diary?" Amelia asked, her hand in his as it had been countless times over the years. "I try not to," Hayes said. "It is too terrible to think about. You might have died in those mountains, or been forced into a life you did not choose, and I would have gone on drifting, never knowing what I was missing. I knew, even as I left it there, that it was a desperate gesture," Amelia said. "The chances of someone finding it and caring enough to follow were so small, but I had to try. I had to believe that there was someone out there who would see me, the real me, through those words." "I did see you," Hayes said. "Every word you wrote showed me who you were. Brave, intelligent, hopeful even in darkness. How could I not follow that? How could I not try to find you?" "Fate," Amelia said, echoing the conversation they had on their first day together. "I told you I believed in it." "You did," Hayes agreed, "and you were right. Everything that happened, the hard things and the good things, they led us here together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. The stars began to appear, the same stars that had guided Hayes on his journey to find Amelia all those years ago. Inside the house, Amelia's diary sat on a shelf in their bedroom. The leather was worn now, the pages yellowed, but every word was still legible. They had shared it with their children as they grew old enough to understand, teaching them the story of how their parents met, how courage and hope and a willingness to help a stranger had created the family they all cherished. Hayes sometimes took the diary down and read entries at random, remembering the voice that had called to him across the miles, the woman he had known before he met her. The words still moved him, still showed him the heart of the woman he loved. "Thank you," he said suddenly, turning to look at Amelia. For what? She asked. For leaving the diary. For being brave enough to hope someone would find it. For choosing me when you could have chosen safety, security, an easier path. For building this life with me. Amelia smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart 20 years before. Thank you for finding it, for following the trail, for risking everything to save a stranger, for loving me every day since then. They kissed, and it was like the first kiss and like coming home all at once. The next morning, Hayes rode out to check on the horses in the far pasture. It was something he did often, enjoying the solitude and the connection with the animals that had been such a big part of his life. As he rode, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. A drifting cowboy finding a diary in the dust, following a trail left by a desperate woman, a rescue that turned into a courtship that became a marriage that grew into a family and a life full of purpose and love. It seemed impossible, the kind of story people would dismiss as too convenient, too perfect. But it had happened. Every word of it was real. And the proof was in the life they had built together, in the children they had raised, in the community they had helped create. When Hayes returned to the house for lunch, he found Amelia in her study, working on lesson plans for the fall term. She looked up when he entered, and her face lit up with the same joy he had seen on the day he proposed. "I was just thinking about the new schoolhouse," she said. "They are finally going to build it big enough to accommodate all the students who want to attend. Real classrooms, a library, everything I have dreamed of. It is really happening, Hayes." "You made it happen," Hayes said. "You had a vision and you worked for it and you did not give up." "I am so proud of you." "We made it happen," Amelia corrected. "None of this would exist without you. Your support, your belief in me, the stability you created that let me focus on teaching. We are a team, remember?" "I remember," Hayes said, crossing the room to embrace her. Partners from the start. They stood together in her study, surrounded by books and papers and the evidence of a life well lived. Outside, they could hear the sounds of Santa Rosa going about its business, the town they had helped build, the community they had invested in. That evening, they hosted dinner for their children and grandchildren. The house was full again, full of noise and laughter and the chaotic joy of a large family gathering. Hayes watched it all from his seat at the head of the table, Amelia beside him, and felt complete. His oldest son, Henry, now 20 and working as a deputy marshal, told stories about his cases. His daughter Anna, married now and expecting her first child, talked about the teaching position she had just accepted in Albuquerque. The younger children, still teenagers, argued and joked and ate as though they had never seen food before. It was perfect in its imperfection, real in its messiness. This was life, the life Hayes had built from nothing, starting with a diary found in the dust and a decision to follow it. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Hayes and Amelia prepared for bed. It was a routine they had followed for 20 years, comfortable and familiar. As Amelia brushed out her hair, now streaked with silver, Hayes watched her in the mirror. "I love you," he said, as he said every night. "I love you too," she replied, as she always did, such simple words, but they contained everything. They contained the fear of almost losing each other, the joy of building a life together, the 1,000 small moments of support and laughter and connection that made up a marriage. They contained the children sleeping in their own homes, the grandchildren yet to be born, the future stretching out before them. They lay down together in the bed they had shared for 2 decades, and Amelia curled into Hayes's side as she always did. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, grateful for every day they had together. "You ever miss it?" Amelia asked sleepily. "The wandering, the freedom of having no ties." Hayes thought about that. No, he said honestly. I thought that was freedom, but it was just emptiness. This is freedom. Choosing to build something, choosing to stay, choosing to love someone and let them love you back. This is the life I always wanted. I just did not know it until I found you. I am glad you found me, Amelia murmured. I am so glad. She drifted off to sleep, her breathing becoming slow and even. Hayes stayed awake a little longer, thinking about the twists and turns that had led him to this moment. If he had ridden past that trading post, if he had ignored the diary, if he had decided it was not his problem, his life would have been completely different. He would have gone to that lumber camp, worked for a few months, moved on to the next job. He would still be drifting, still be searching for something he could not name. He would never have known Amelia, never have had this family, never have found this home. The thought was unbearable. Thank God for lost diaries and the conscience that made him follow. Thank God for desperate women brave enough to leave trails. Thank God for choices made in moments that seemed small but changed everything. Hayes closed his eyes and let sleep take him, content in the knowledge that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Hayes's business partner, Richard Thornton, retired, and Hayes bought him out, becoming the sole owner of the horse ranch and trading operation. It was a significant investment, but Hayes had saved wisely, and the business was prosperous enough to support it. Amelia's school continued to grow. The new schoolhouse was completed when she was 45, and she became the principal as well as a teacher, overseeing 3 other instructors and educating children from all over the region. She published articles about education in territorial newspapers, advocating for better funding and opportunities for girls. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a large party that brought people from all over New Mexico territory. Friends they had made over the decades, former students of Amelia's now grown with children of their own, business associates of Hayes's, all gathered to honor the couple who had become pillars of the Santa Rosa community. Marshall Crawford, now retired but still living in town, gave a toast. 25 years ago, a young cowboy walked into my office with a woman he had rescued, and a story I could barely believe. But I learned that day that sometimes the impossible happens. Sometimes courage and decency and love are enough to change everything. Hayes and Amelia Turner embody everything good about this territory and the people trying to build something worthwhile here. To 25 more years, everyone cheered and drank, and Hayes looked at Amelia across the crowded room. She was 50 now, her hair mostly silver, laugh lines around her eyes and mouth. She was more beautiful to him now than she had been at 23, because now her beauty was layered with everything they had experienced together. She caught his eye and smiled, and in that smile was everything they did not need to say aloud. When Hayes was 52, a young man rode into the ranch asking for work. He was thin and travel-worn, with the same look Hayes remembered seeing in his own reflection years ago, the look of someone searching for something they could not name. Hayes hired him, taught him the business, and watched as the young man found his footing. In his spare time, the young man wrote in a journal, and Hayes recognized that need to put thoughts on paper, to make sense of the world through words. One evening, the young man asked Hayes how he had ended up in Santa Rosa, how he had built such a successful life. Hayes told him the story, all of it, from finding the diary to following the trail to rescuing Amelia to building their life together. The young man listened with wide eyes. "That is an incredible story, sir, like something from a dime novel." "It is a true story," Hayes said. "And the lesson is this: when you find something worth staying for, stay. Do not keep drifting because it feels safe or because you are afraid to commit. The best things in life require you to put down roots and invest yourself completely. Did you ever regret it? The young man asked. Giving up the freedom, Hayes thought about that. Not once, he said firmly. Not for a single day. I gained so much more than I gave up. I found my home, my purpose, my family. A man cannot ask for more than that. The young man nodded thoughtfully, and Hayes saw something shift in his expression, some decision being made. 6 months later, that young man married a local girl and bought a piece of land near the Turner Ranch. Hayes attended the wedding and felt like he was watching his own story play out again in a different form. Life continued its rhythm. Grandchildren grew and had children of their own. The ranch prospered through good times and survived the bad. Amelia retired from active teaching, but continued to serve on the school board, ensuring that education remained a priority in Santa Rosa. Hayes and Amelia grew old together, their love deepening with every passing year. They took walks every evening when weather permitted, hand in hand, talking or simply enjoying the comfortable silence that came from decades of companionship. One evening, when Hayes was 72 and Amelia was 70, they sat on their porch watching another New Mexico sunset. Their children had arranged a special celebration for their 50th wedding anniversary planned for the following week. 50 years, Amelia said wonderingly. Half a century since you found my diary. Best decision I ever made following that trail, Hayes said. Best decision I ever made, leaving it to be found, Amelia replied. I sometimes think about that version of myself, so young and so frightened. I wish I could tell her that it would all work out, that the life she would build would exceed her wildest dreams. She was brave enough to hope, Hayes said. That is what mattered. We were both brave, Amelia said. You were brave enough to get involved, to care about a stranger's fate. That is rare, Hayes. Most people would have walked away. I could not walk away from you, Hayes said simply. Not then. Not ever. They held hands as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had seen thousands of times but never tired of. The land stretched out before them, the same land that had witnessed their meeting, their courtship, their marriage, their life together. I would do it all again, Hayes said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it. So would I, Amelia agreed. Every single moment. The 50th anniversary celebration was everything their children had promised. The whole town turned out, it seemed, along with people from all over the territory. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, stories shared about the impact Hayes and Amelia had made on countless lives. Their children presented them with a leather-bound book that contained letters from former students, business associates, friends, all writing about how Hayes and Amelia had influenced their lives. Hayes and Amelia read the letters together over the following weeks, amazed at the ripple effects of their choices and actions. One letter stood out. It was from a woman named Catherine who had been one of Amelia's first students. She wrote about how Amelia's teaching had inspired her to become a teacher herself, and how she now ran a school for girls in Denver. She wrote about the importance of women who showed other women what was possible, who taught them to be independent and strong. You changed my life, Mrs. Turner, the letter read. You showed me that a woman could be educated, could work, could build a life on her own terms. That lesson has shaped everything I have become. Thank you for your courage and your vision. Thank you for being an example of what is possible. Amelia cried when she read that letter, happy tears that spoke to the fulfillment of her dreams. Hayes held her as he had held her through joy and sorrow for 50 years, his partner in all things. They lived several more years, watching their family continue to grow and thrive. When Hayes was 76, he developed a persistent cough that worried Amelia. The doctor in Santa Rosa, who had delivered several of their grandchildren, examined him and delivered news they both knew was coming eventually. "Your heart is wearing out," the doctor said gently. "It happens to all of us eventually. You need to take it easy, no more hard work, plenty of rest." Hayes nodded, accepting the news with the same calm he had faced everything else in his life. He had lived a full life, a good life. He was not afraid of what came next. He spent his final months surrounded by family, telling stories, sharing wisdom, enjoying every moment he had left. Amelia never left his side unless absolutely necessary, and he drew strength from her presence as he always had. One evening, as the sun set once again over the New Mexico landscape, Hayes called all his children and grandchildren to gather around. They filled the house, spilling out onto the porch, 3 generations of love made tangible. "I want you all to know something," Hayes said, his voice weaker now but still clear. "Your grandmother and I, we built this life from nothing. We started with a diary found in the dust and faith in each other. Everything you see, everything you are part of came from that, from choosing love, from choosing to stay, from choosing to build something that would last beyond our own lives." He paused, gathering strength. "I have no regrets, not one. I found everything I ever needed the day I found that diary. Remember that. Remember that the choices you make in a single moment can change everything. Choose courage, choose love, choose to build something that matters." His oldest son, Henry, now a grandfather himself, spoke for everyone. "We will remember, Dad. We will teach our children and our children's children. The story of the diary, of you and Mom, it will live on." Hayes smiled, satisfied. He had done what he set out to do all those years ago. He had built a life worthy of Amelia. He had created something that would last. That night, Amelia lay down beside him in their bed as she had done for 54 years. She took his hand and held it gently. "I love you," she said, as she had said countless times. "I love you too," Hayes replied, as he always did. "Thank you for a beautiful life, Amelia. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for finding me," Amelia said through her tears. "Thank you for following the trail. Thank you for everything." Hayes fell asleep with her hand in his and passed peacefully in the night, leaving behind a legacy of love, family, and community that stretched far beyond what he could have imagined when he picked up a diary in the dust all those years ago. Amelia lived 3 more years. She was strong without him, surrounded by the family they had created, but everyone could see that part of her had gone with Hayes. She continued her work with the school board, continued to write and advocate for education, but there was a wistfulness about her now. She kept the diary on her bedside table and read from it often, remembering the frightened young woman who had left it to be found, remembering the brave young cowboy who had followed it. The story of their meeting, their love, their life together became a cherished family legend, told and retold to each new generation. When Amelia finally passed, peacefully in her sleep at 79, she was buried beside Hayes on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children placed a headstone that read, "Hayes Turner and Amelia Foster Turner. He found her diary. She found her future. Together they found home." The ranch continued under the management of their children and grandchildren. The school that Amelia had championed continued to educate generations of students. The town of Santa Rosa grew and prospered, and the Turner family remained central to its community. Years later, one of their great-great-granddaughters, a teacher herself, was preparing a lesson about family history. She carefully took down the old diary from its place of honor in the family home, now preserved behind glass, and read through the entries that had started it all. The handwriting was faded, the pages brittle with age, but the words still held power. The voice of a young woman facing uncertain danger, leaving a trail and a hope that someone would care enough to follow. The voice that had called to a young cowboy across the miles and changed both their lives forever. The great-great-granddaughter taught her students about courage, about taking chances, about the power of words and the importance of caring about strangers. She taught them that one decision, one moment of choosing to get involved rather than walk away, could create ripples that spread across generations. She taught them about love that starts with compassion and grows into partnership, about building lives of purpose and meaning, about leaving legacies that matter. And in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, where it all began, the story of the cowboy and the diary lived on, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin with the simplest acts of courage and kindness. A diary dropped in the dust, a cowboy who chose to follow it, and a love story that built a family, a community, and a legacy that would never be forgotten. The land still stretched out under the vast New Mexico sky, the same land that had witnessed the beginning of their story. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the juniper and piñon pine, you could almost hear the echo of hoofbeats, of a young cowboy following a trail left by a desperate woman, riding toward a future neither could have imagined but both would build together, one day at a time, with love as their foundation and hope as their guide. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a life well lived, a love that transcended time. From a diary found in the dust to a legacy that spanned generations, Hayes and Amelia Turner had shown that the wildest, most romantic adventures are not always about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about the quiet courage of choosing love, choosing to stay, choosing to build something that lasts. And so their story ended where all good stories should, with love triumphant, family thriving, and the knowledge that they had lived fully, loved completely, and left the world better than they found it. The diary that had brought them together remained, a tangible reminder that sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single decision to follow where your heart leads, even when the path is uncertain and the destination unknown. They had followed that path together, hand in hand, for 54 beautiful years, and the echo of their love continued to resonate through every life they had touched, every student Amelia had taught, every person Hayes had helped, every child and great-grandchild who carried their legacy forward into the future. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. The story of a cowboy who found a diary belonging to a missing woman, followed it straight to his future wife, and built a love story that would never be forgotten.